The air in the courtroom was stale, thick with the scent of old paper and the silent, suffocating weight of judgment. But the only judgment I felt came from the two people sitting at the plaintiff's table. My adoptive parents, Robert and Linda Thompson. They weren't laughing aloud, not yet. Their mockery was a more refined poison, a shared, condescending smirk that had been the backdrop of my entire existence. It was the silent, cutting language they used whenever I dared to dream beyond the beautifully furnished prison they had built for me. For 15 agonizing years, they had relentlessly chipped away at my ambition to become a doctor, branding it a ridiculous fantasy for a girl like me. And now they were here, exuding a chilling confidence, ready to contest the will of a benefactor they believed they had thoroughly and permanently outsmarted. Clad in their impeccably tailored pale gray suits, they looked at me not as a daughter, but as a stray dog that had inexplicably wandered into a palace, a minor nuisance to be swatted away before the main event. They believed they held all the cards, but they had forgotten about the one I had been hiding for years. Before I continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, and leave your like. Helps a lot. Their confidence, however, was a fragile thing, and it took only a few moments to shatter. It happened when the presiding judge, a man renowned for his iron will and unyielding sternness, ascended to his bench. He settled himself, shuffled some papers, and then his gaze swept across the courtroom, finally landing on me. And then the world seemed to stop. The judge, this pillar of judicial authority, simply froze. A wave of stark white washed over his face, erasing all its stern lines, leaving behind a mask of pure disbelief. His hand, which had been holding a black fountain pen, began to tremble, a subtle tremor at first, then a violent shudder that sent the pen clattering onto the polished surface of his desk. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the dead silence. He stared, his mouth hanging agape, his eyes wide with a look of profound shock, as if he were seeing a ghost. In a voice that was barely a whisper, yet carried to every corner of the silent room, he stammered, "Dr. Thompson? Is that Aisha Thompson? What are you doing here?" In that single moment, the smirks on Robert and Linda's faces dissolved. The smug color drained from their cheeks, replaced by the same ghastly pallor that had overtaken the judge. That was the moment they knew. It was the moment they understood that their meticulously crafted world of deceit, their fortress of lies, was about to be leveled to the ground. But for you to truly grasp the raw, unadulterated shock on their faces, for you to feel the seismic weight of that judge's trembling hand, you need to understand how this nightmare began. It all started 15 years ago, on a crisp, biting autumn day in Ohio. I was 12 years old, a skinny black girl with unruly, frizzy braids that I could never quite tame, living in a state-run orphanage. The place was scrubbed clean, the floors shining with disinfectant, but it was an antiseptic safety, utterly devoid of warmth or affection. Hope was a currency I had long since run out of. My world was a grayscale photograph, and I had forgotten what color looked like. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, Robert and Linda Thompson walked through the double doors, and it was as if the sun had decided to come inside. They were the picture of perfection, handsome and beautiful, dressed in expensive clothes, their smiles so practiced and brilliant they seemed to throw sparks. They told the director they wanted to adopt an older child, to give someone who had been overlooked a real chance at a family. And then their eyes landed on me. Against all logic, against all the odds that had been stacked against me my entire life, that someone was me. I can still feel the smooth, worn handle of the single small suitcase I carried as I walked out of that gray building for the last time. As our luxury sedan pulled away from the curb, I looked back at the orphanage, the only home I had ever known, and felt a tiny, fragile flicker of something I hadn't dared to feel in years. Hope. Their house was a palace plucked from a dream, a sprawling two-story colonial in a pristine tree-lined suburb, complete with a perfectly manicured lawn that looked like a green velvet carpet. For the first few weeks, I lived inside that dream. Linda, who insisted I call her Mom, took me on shopping sprees, filling my closet with beautiful clothes I was almost too scared to touch. Robert, my new dad, was patient and kind, helping me with my math homework at the grand mahogany dining table. My new room was a vision in soft yellow, with a real wooden desk for studying and a window that looked out onto a garden of roses. It was perfect. But the most beautiful dreams often curdle into the most terrifying nightmares. The initial warmth was a facade, a performance for an audience of one. When the doors were closed and the performance ended, the house grew cold and silent, haunted by unspoken rules and invisible tripwires. The love I had so desperately craved turned out to be conditional, a reward for being quiet, for being invisible, for not wanting too much, for not being too much. And my greatest crime in their cold, calculating eyes was that I always wanted too much. My biggest dream was my biggest transgression. The first time they deliberately shattered that dream is a memory seared into my soul. It was a few months after my arrival. I was sitting at that same mahogany dining table, practically vibrating with excitement over a school science project on the human heart. I had spent weeks building a detailed model, fascinated by the intricate dance of valves and chambers. "When I grow up," I announced, my voice ringing with the pure, unshakable conviction of a 12-year-old, "I'm going to be a heart surgeon." The silence that followed was immediate and absolute. Linda paused, her fork hovering over her plate of salmon. She exchanged a look with Robert, a barely perceptible smirk playing on her lips. Robert let out a short, sharp chuckle, a sound devoid of humor and full of pure, undiluted derision. "A doctor. You," he said, his eyes scanning me as if I were a bug. "Aisha, let's be realistic. That's a very ambitious goal. It requires a significant amount of money and, frankly, a certain kind of mind." His meaning was clear. "Not my mind." "But I'm smart," I protested, my voice shrinking under the weight of his condescension. "I get the best grades in my class." "That's nice, dear," Linda cooed, her voice a poisonous confection of fake sweetness. "But your father is right. It's a lovely thought, a nice little fantasy for you to have. But people like us, we have to be practical." And then came the line that would become the refrain of my adolescence, the poison they would drip into my ear day after day. "You should think about something more attainable. Perhaps a nurse's aide. You're very good at tidying up your room after all." She smiled, a perfect placid smile, but her eyes were like chips of blue ice. Robert nodded in agreement, already cutting his steak. The conversation declared over. I sat there, stunned into silence, the delicious food now tasting like ash in my mouth. "Fantasy. People like us. Girl like you." The words became a toxic echo chamber in my head. I felt the hot, sharp sting of tears behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not in front of them. I swallowed my food, I swallowed my tears, and I swallowed my dream, pushing it down deep inside me, to a place where I prayed they couldn't touch it again. That night, I cried silently into my new, soft pillow, my small body shaking with a grief I couldn't name. Why did they hate my dream so much? Was it because I was adopted? Was it because I was a black girl living in their perfect, sterile, white world? Or was it something deeper, something darker that I couldn't yet begin to comprehend? As the years crawled by, their subtle mockery became a well-oiled machine, a slow, methodical dismantling of my spirit. It wasn't physical abuse. They never laid a hand on me. Theirs was a more insidious cruelty, a campaign of 1,000 tiny cuts designed to bleed my self-worth dry. I would bring home a report card glittering with straight A's, and Linda would glance at it before saying, "That's wonderful, honey. Now, could you please take out the trash?" I won the regional middle school science fair with a project on cellular regeneration, and Robert patted me on the head as if I were a dog. "Clever girl," he said with a hollow smile. "You'll make some man a very efficient secretary one day." I was their charity case, their pet project, the living proof of their benevolence. At their lavish dinner parties, their friends would coo and praise their enormous hearts for taking in a disadvantaged child from the system. Linda would blush and demur. "Oh, it's nothing. Aisha is a sweet girl, very simple in her needs." All the while, I would be standing just inside the kitchen door, holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres, my face burning with a humiliation so profound it felt like a physical fever. At 15, I aced my advanced biology final exam, achieving the highest score in the school's history. For one foolish, hopeful moment, I thought this would be different. This wasn't a dream. It was tangible proof, an A+ written in bold red ink. I found Linda in the living room, reclining on a chaise lounge, reading a glossy magazine. I held out the paper like an offering. "Look, Mom. Got an A+. The highest score." She took the paper without looking up, glanced at it for a fraction of a second, and a flicker of genuine annoyance crossed her features. "Cute," she said, her voice flat. She then folded my triumphant paper in half and placed her sweating glass of iced tea on top of it, using it as a coaster. I watched, horrified, as the condensation immediately blurred the red ink of my grade, the letters bleeding into a meaningless pink smudge. "Dreams don't pay the bills, Aisha," she said, finally meeting my eyes. "It's time you grew up and accepted the fact that you are simply not college material." Robert walked in at that moment, drawn by the tension. He looked at the wet, ruined paper under her glass, then at my crestfallen face. He just nodded slowly. "Listen to your mother. We know what's best for you. We know you're kind. Always reaching for things that aren't meant for them. Or kind." The words hung in the air, thick and suffocating. That was the moment the last of my childish hope died. The wall around my heart, which had been slowly building for years, finally sealed shut, encasing it in ice. I stopped seeking their approval. I stopped trying to make them proud. I retreated into the one place they couldn't control, my mind. My books became my refuge, and the local free clinic where I started volunteering became my sanctuary. There, a senior nurse named Maria Harper, a woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude, took me under her wing. "You've got the hands and the heart for this work, child," she told me one afternoon as we dressed a patient's wound. "Don't you let a single soul on this earth tell you any different." Her words were a lifeline in the ocean of doubt they had created for me. Home, however, had transformed into a prison of suffocating tension. The atmosphere was thick with unspoken resentments. I started noticing things I had previously ignored. Hushed, frantic arguments that would abruptly stop the moment I entered a room, the increasingly frequent smell of whiskey on Robert's breath when he came home late at night. A strange, creeping fear began to take root in my heart, a chilling premonition that nothing about this perfect family was what it seemed. One afternoon, I was coming silently down the stairs when I heard their voices from the study, the door slightly ajar. "We can't keep this up forever, Linda," Robert muttered, his voice strained and low. "What if she finds out? The older she gets, the more risk there is." My heart began to hammer against my ribs. "Finds out what?" Linda's voice was a frantic, sharp whisper. "She won't. She's just a kid. She's not smart enough to figure it out. As long as we control the narrative, she's just our kid." My blood ran cold. The way she said our kid wasn't with affection. It was with a chilling sense of ownership, as if I were a volatile asset to be managed, a problem to be contained. What in God's name were they hiding? If you're still here with me, don't forget to subscribe, activate notifications, leave your like, and share this video with someone. My chance to uncover the truth came a few weeks later. They were attending their annual country club gala, an event that would keep them out until the early hours of the morning. My mind immediately went to Linda's antique writing desk in the home office, a room I was strictly forbidden to enter. The top drawer was always locked. But I had seen her, just once, tuck the small ornate key under a loose corner of the Persian rug. My hands trembled uncontrollably as I slid the key into the lock and turned it. The click was deafening in the silent house. I rummaged through neat stacks of bills and correspondence until my fingers brushed against something at the very back. A thick, yellowed envelope. My name was typed on it, but it wasn't the name I knew. It read, Adoption of Aisha Marie Washington. Washington. I'd been Aisha Thompson my entire life. My fingers, clumsy with adrenaline, tore the envelope open. Inside was a legal letter, dated just after my 2nd birthday. It stated that my biological parents, Dr. David and Elena Washington, were confirmed deceased in a catastrophic private aviation accident. They had always told me my parents were teenagers who had given me up willingly. They had died. But there was more. Tucked behind the official letter was a small, handwritten note from Robert to Linda. The ink faded with time. It read, We have to keep her quiet about her background. The lawyers said the inheritance is ours to manage, but if she ever gets curious, we could be finished. Just keep her humble. Keep her thinking she's worthless. It's the only way to protect the money. Inheritance. The word didn't just register. It detonated in my mind. In a flash of horrifying, sickening clarity, it all clicked into place. The pristine house, the luxury cars, the country club membership, the endless shopping sprees. It wasn't their money. It was my money. My dead parents' money. The years of mockery, the constant, soul-crushing insults, the relentless reminders of my place. It wasn't just casual cruelty. It was a strategy. It was a calculated long-term psychological campaign designed to keep me so broken, so beaten down, that I would never think to ask a single question about where I came from. My saviors were my captors. My parents were my thieves. What do you do when the foundation of your entire life is revealed to be a lie? The tension in the house after that discovery was a living entity, a monster that sat with us at the dinner table. Our silent meals became a silent war. I became a ghost in my own home, my own life, observing them with new, cold eyes. I saw the way Robert would quickly hide bank statements that arrived in the mail, the way Linda would flinch if I asked a question that was too specific. I started my own secret investigation, piecing together the fragments of my stolen life. At 17, armed with a few key phrases from the letter, I couldn't bear the suffocating silence any longer. I found Linda in the kitchen, arranging flowers in a vase. My voice trembled, but it was steady. "Who is Elena Washington?" I asked, my voice cutting through the quiet. "What inheritance have you been hiding from me?" The blood-red rose she was holding slipped from her fingers and fell to the pristine white floor. Her face went completely ashen. "Where did you hear that name?" she shrieked, her voice high and ragged with panic. "You ungrateful, wicked girl. After everything we've given you." Robert stormed in from the study, his face a thundercloud of fury. "I warned you to stop this nonsense," he snarled, getting so close to my face I could smell the stale scent of his fear. "This is our house. You will show us respect. Forget whatever pathetic fantasy you've cooked up in that head of yours, or I swear to you, you will regret it for the rest of your life." Their raw panic was all the confirmation I needed. That night I packed a small bag, my hands shaking but my purpose clear. I went straight to the only person in the world I trusted, Ms. Maria Harper. In the safety of her small, warm apartment, I told her everything. The tears I had held back for 15 years finally came, a torrent of grief and rage and betrayal. She didn't interrupt. She just held my hand, her grip firm and reassuring. "Aisha," she said when I was finished, her voice filled with a fierce, righteous anger. "You are not wicked. You are a survivor. And now we are going to fight." When I didn't come home, the Thompsons' panic exploded. My phone was bombarded with calls and texts, furious threats alternating with tearful, manipulative pleas. "We gave you everything. Home. A family." Linda sobbed into my voicemail. "How could you do this to us?" "What family?" I wondered, a cold bitterness spreading through me. "A family built on a mountain of lies." With Ms. Harper by my side, we went to the Public Records Office and the library archives. My hands shook as I scrolled through years of old newspaper articles on a microfiche reader. And then I found it. A small article from a national newspaper dated 20 years prior. Tech mogul David Washington and heiress wife Elena perish in tragic plane crash. I read about my father, a genius inventor, and my mother, the daughter of a prominent Ohio family. The final paragraph delivered a blow that knocked the wind out of me. Their 2-year-old daughter Aisha was the sole survivor of the crash, having been left with a sitter. The child's whereabouts are being kept private to protect her from media intrusion. I stared at the grainy photograph accompanying the article. It was my mother, Elena Washington. She was breathtakingly beautiful, with a radiant smile and eyes that were the exact same shape as mine. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had stolen my mother's face from me. They had erased her from my life. The final, most shocking piece of the puzzle came from a legal aid lawyer Ms. Harper knew. He uncovered the sealed records. The private adoption hadn't been random. It had been personally arranged by my maternal grandmother, a woman I never knew existed, the legendary now-retired Ohio State Supreme Court Justice Eleanor Vance. In her grief, she had wanted to shield me from the press and the vultures that would circle a young heiress. She chose the Thompsons, believing they were a decent, loving family. She placed my entire multi-million-dollar inheritance into a trust, with Robert and Linda appointed as trustees. They were not just my adoptive parents. They were my legal fiduciaries, bound by law to protect my interests. And they had been systematically embezzling my entire fortune since the day I entered their home. And that brings us back to the suffocating silence of the courtroom. The air was thick with unspoken accusations and the stench of deceit. Robert and Linda's high-priced lawyer painted a masterful picture of me as a troubled, delusional, and ungrateful girl, spinning elaborate fantasies of wealth to hurt the loving parents who had saved her from a bleak future. When I finally took the stand, my heart felt like a hummingbird trapped in my chest. But as I looked across the room and saw them, not my parents but the architects of my lifelong pain, a cold, hard calm settled over me. My voice was clear and steady as I walked the court through every poisoned word, every shattered dream, every stolen dollar. Their lawyer was brutal in his cross-examination. "So, Miss Thompson, or is it Washington today? You truly expect this court to believe that these two loving, upstanding citizens are not your saviors, but are in fact master criminals straight out of a novel?" He sneered, gesturing to Robert and Linda, who were now dabbing at their eyes with handkerchiefs. But then my lawyer began to present the evidence. An endless river of bank statements showing years of systematic transfers from the trust account to their personal accounts. Receipts for luxury cars, exotic vacations, and country club fees. The paper trail was undeniable. Linda began to crumble, her quiet sobs turning into gulping, theatrical gasps. "We did it all for her," she cried out. "We just wanted to give her a good life." Robert remained silent, his face a mask of stone, glaring at me with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. He wasn't sorry. He was furious that he'd been caught. And then, the moment that changed everything. The judge, who had been listening with an unnerving intensity, called for a recess. He returned 15 minutes later, his face grim, holding a single sealed manila file. "During the recess," he began, his voice resonating with a newfound authority, "I took the liberty of unsealing a related family court file from our archives. the private adoption of Aisha Marie Washington, arranged by her grandmother, the Honorable Justice Eleanor Vance. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Robert and Linda froze. The judge continued, his eyes fixed on me, but this time they held a look of profound sorrow and respect. Justice Eleanor Vance was my mentor when I was a young law clerk. She was a woman of unimpeachable integrity and profound compassion. I also, on my own authority, ordered an expedited DNA comparison this morning between Miss Thompson and a sample kept on file from the original accident investigation. He held up a paper. The results are unequivocal. Aisha Thompson is, without a shadow of a doubt, Aisha Marie Washington, the sole surviving heir of David and Elena Washington. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle like a shroud over the room. But he wasn't finished. The records also show, the judge said, his voice dropping, now laced with a cold, simmering fury, that Justice Vance set up a substantial trust for her only grandchild. She entrusted Mr. and Mrs. Thompson not only with her grandchild's life, but with her future, her security, and her legacy. He looked directly at them, and his gaze was not one of judgment, but of utter contempt. This court has seen greed, has seen betrayal. But I must say, and here his voice wavered, his hand resting on the gavel beginning to tremble with rage, I have rarely in my entire career seen such a profound, systematic, and calculated betrayal of a sacred trust. To take in a grieving orphan child and to systematically rob her not only of her inheritance, but of her very identity. To actively mock her dreams and suppress her potential simply to keep her from discovering her own worth. It is a cruelty of an almost unimaginable degree. The judge was visibly trembling, not from weakness, but from a sheer righteous rage that seemed to shake the very bench he sat upon. This court, he announced, his voice ringing with the thunder of absolute authority as he lifted the gavel high, orders the immediate and full restoration of all misappropriated funds from the Washington Trust to its rightful heir, Miss Aisha Washington, with punitive damages. All guardianship rights of Robert and Linda Thompson are hereby, and forever, terminated. He leaned forward, his eyes boring into them. And I am personally referring this entire case to the district attorney's office for a full criminal investigation into embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. The gavel slammed down, the sound sealing their fate. It was over. A wave of relief so powerful, so immense, it almost brought me to my knees washed over me. I felt a gentle arm wrap around my shoulders. It was Ms. Harper, her eyes shining with tears. I fell into her embrace, and the sobs I had suppressed for a lifetime finally broke free. Not tears of pain, but of release, of justice, of liberation. That was 4 years ago. Today I am 22. And I am Dr. Aisha Washington. I graduated at the top of my class from Johns Hopkins Medical School. I fulfilled the dream a 12-year-old girl dared to have at a dinner table long ago, a dream they tried to murder. The inheritance they tried to hide from me now funds the Washington Vance Foundation, a non-profit I established that provides scholarships and mentorship for underprivileged and orphan children who dare to dream big. The memory of that judge's trembling hand stays with me. It's a constant, powerful reminder that the truth possesses a force that can shake even the most formidable foundations of lies. My life is not defined by those who tried to diminish me, but by the incredible legacy of the parents I never had the chance to know and the fierce grandmother who tried to protect me even after her death. And for the first time in my life, standing on my own 2 feet, in a life I built from the ashes of their betrayal, I am truly, completely, and unapologetically home. Thank you for listening to my story. Please subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, comment below, leave your like, and share this video with others.